discussing her journey back to the Catholic faith. She's never really left it fully, but I know she has various amounts of knowledge with New Age, occult, all the different religions in the world that try to bring us in. But tonight she's going to be talking about how she identified as LGBT for 30 years, just about 30 years. And so Rosemarie knows what our Catholic faith teaches, but she really didn't feel at home in the faith or at church. She didn't feel like she belonged anywhere, actually. She didn't feel like she belonged in LGBTQ, the world, and she didn't feel like she belonged in the church world. And so I think it's really important that we hear her testimony, that we can relate to all the experiences that she's had, and so that we understand this issue in a more compassionate way. And I hope I'm not leaving anything out, but I know Rosemarie's going to answer questions and stuff too at the end. But we're just so grateful for her witness and her testimony, and take it away. When that starts, let her know.
So first I'd like to thank Debbie, and I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me to share my journey with you. It's been really hard, really hard. Heartbreaking, actually, to feel like I don't have a home in the church. Heartbreaking to feel like I didn't have a place in my family anymore. Heartbreaking when I lost friends, both times. When I went back to the church, I lost friends. When I left the church to try to fit into the LGBTQ world, I lost friends. It didn't matter what I did. I was stuck in this purgatory, this awful place. And I did try to take my life a few times. So it started for me when, growing up, I was molested by my mother's cousin from the ages of 4 to 12. And I was very religious little girl. And I loved Jesus and Mary and my rosary and the sacraments, and I wanted to be a nun. And I had a very close relationship with God. And when I was 12 years old, I kind of realized what was happening. I realized that when the boys in my class started to change, when we were getting older, they started looking like men. And I was like, I didn't like that. And I didn't know why. So I went to a therapist. And I told my therapist, I'm really hurt because I'm afraid of men. I was petrified of men. And because of what I went through, which was severe for many years. And they said to me, because this is what therapists and psychologists do, they said, well, maybe you're gay. And I said, I don't think I am, because that would put me at odds with my faith. So I spoke to a priest, and I had a really close friend at that time. And I was so confused because of what this therapist told me. And he said, are you thinking that you love your friend? And do you do anything? And I said, no, we didn't do anything. But you love her? Yeah, I love her. You're going to hell. It was severe. He said that from the confessional. So I figured there's nothing I could do. So my therapist, we talked about it more, and he said, it's okay to be gay. It's okay to be a lesbian. That's fine. Or we can go down every single horrible memory you've ever had, all the trauma, of which some of it I don't remember, because thank God for that, right? I didn't want to remember that. God is so good that he doesn't let us remember everything. But I had a lot of triggers. I had a lot of PTSD. So I said, yeah, okay. Around the same time, the sex abuse scandal in the church broke out. And I said, well, who were they to tell me anything? I was judging the church very severely because I really did not want to deal with my trauma. And that's a fact. I'm not saying, I have to do a disclaimer, I'm not saying anything against the LGBTQ community. I'm not saying anything against people that are there. This is my journey, this is my story. And I'm not speaking for everyone. So fast forward, I was in a relationship. I even got married. Every single time I would force myself to be intimate with my partner, it felt like I was being raped every single time. But there had to be something wrong with me. There was something wrong. I wasn't normal. So then the relationship part of it stopped. Thank God. Then I tried to go back to church, and there was some priests that weren't very charitable with their sermons. And then I felt like I had no place there. I would see angry priests where I lived talking about, especially in the month of June. You don't understand what the month of June is like. I love the Sacred Heart of Jesus. This is where all love comes from. This is where all pure love comes from. He can't help but love us. And he loves me, and I'm a mess, and I know that I'm a mess. You know, one day, hopefully, I'll get to see him face to face, and he's going to just look at me, and he's going to be like, come here. That's what I'm hoping. Maybe it's okay if I get smacked, that's fine, although I don't think he'll do that, because he's just love. Jesus, especially in the Sacred Heart, is love. And I'm hoping one day to be able to get there. But this whole journey was just, I was trying to find him. And I was trying to be okay with my, which, by the way, at first in the 90s, it wasn't an LGBTQ identity. The T came on later. And then they added the Q. And then they added the I. And then they added the A. And then they added the plus. And we have young people right now who are identifying as asexual. All they want is to live a life of celibacy. But that's a dirty word. Celibacy and chastity, I can tell you from my own experience, those are really, really dirty words. Like, you want to live chastely. What does that mean? St. Joseph really helped me with that in his chaste heart. That devotion really helped me tremendously to come out of that. So here I am, trying to fit in, going to events. I've never been to Pride because I was too scared to go. I went to a women's weekend. We had to stay one night because it was snowing in the Pocono Mountains, so we got stuck. The next day we were out of there because it was gross. It was gross. The things that they were saying, the things that they were doing. I said, this isn't reflecting me. This has nothing to do with love that I feel for another human being. It was overly sexualized. My friends took me to P-Town. They thought that would be fun. It didn't go well for me at all. I spent all the time actually in Cape Cod and going to museums and going to the Provincetown Museum where the ship landed, and I completely avoided the strip because I didn't like what was happening. I didn't like what was going on. And why am I telling my testimony, right? Because I care about the young people. I care about anybody that's like me that's suffering. Anybody that thinks that they can't approach God. And I've come to learn that the more sinful of a life you're living, the more God wants you to have, the more God loves you, despite all of that. People in the community, I got a thing called the Gay Straight Alliance off the ground in my college. And the first thing I did is I found an Episcopalian priest to talk to these young people. I was an older student. I was like about maybe 5 or 6 years older than them. And they were living their life a certain way, and they were talking about like things like hooking up that didn't really mean anything. And a lot of young people do that. It's not just gay or lesbian people. And I got a priest in there because they were saying, what does it matter what we do? We're going to hell anyway. Because there was no compassion coming from the church. There wasn't. Then Pope Francis got elected. And what was really wonderful about Pope Francis being elected is the first time I felt like I was able to approach the sacraments. Just approach them. I have a priest who's a really good friend of mine. And no joke, he did this. And he said, I love you. That's all I needed. I needed to hear that I was loved in the church, not judged. Because I was ferociously judged. I was called a pedophile. I was called a groomer. With everything I went through, this is what people in my own family were calling me. Because of the media. Because of what the media shows. I was having a conversation actually earlier that a lot of people in the gay and lesbian communities, they don't even go to Pride. They don't go. They don't like it. They don't go. And one of the things I think we could do is take a hammer to these ridiculous boxes. Because people that are homosexual, that has nothing to do with people that are transgender. In fact, I'm going to tell you honestly, they don't like each other. Trans people and gay people and lesbians do not like each other. Gay men do not like lesbians. They don't. I know, 30 years. I've seen it. And now it's getting to a point where women in general are being pushed out, and that makes me a TERF. I've been called a TERF, which is a trans exclusionary radical feminist. And I'm not. When I was 40 years old, I thought I was trans. Why would that have happened to me? A year before that, the relationship I was in to the person I was married to that was the same sex as me, she set me up to be assaulted. I was assaulted in my own bed by another person, by a man. And I didn't feel safe being a woman anymore. I don't want to be a woman anymore. I was done. So I went to go see a therapist who I figured would be open. I figured he would be affirming. And I remember he had like this dog, he had this emotional support dog in his office. He's like, do you mind? I'm like, no, I love dogs. The dog came over to me. I was very nervous. And he's like, why are you here? And I said, you know what? I think I want to go all the way. I don't want to live my life as a woman anymore. I was done. I was tired of being hurt as a woman. I was tired of it. He said, okay. And so you need a letter from me, but first I'm going to ask you for a favor. I want you to come here. You have to come here 3 times, because that whole rule about if you want to transition is gone. You don't really even need counseling anymore, which is really, really frightening. And he asked me a question. He asked me, what name are you going by? I said, my name is Frankie, because my middle name is Francis, and I love my grandmother. And my grandmother made me feel safe. So something cute, Franky, Frankie. He's like, okay. And he asked me a question. He said, what's wrong with Rosemarie? Just like that. And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean what's wrong with Rosemarie? He said, why don't we want to be Rosemarie anymore? Because when you do that, the transgender community convinces you that you now have to have a dead name. You have to get rid of all your baby pictures. And that person is dead. To see your own baby pictures is an insult to you. Because you were never that little girl. You were always the boy that you're now going to be. It really is very, I want you to understand how, I'm not saying that I had nothing to do with, I'm not saying that I had nothing to do with
Can't shut it off.
the choices that I made, because I had everything to do with the choices that I made.
It off and it won't go off.
But when he asked me what was wrong with Rosemarie, I broke down. I started to cry, and I got really mad at him. And I said to him, Rosemarie gets hurt in a sexual way over and over and over again. And the reason why I kept getting hurt, because I was assaulted, which ended my marriage. But I was also assaulted in high school because I froze. Because that first therapist I went to, and the second person I went to, and the third person I went to, and I kept going to therapists trying to get help because I was so afraid of men. They didn't help me at all. They didn't. They wanted to affirm something in me that I didn't even want. I really did. I really wanted to be a nun. Who knows if that was even a thing? That would have been another way to avoid being with men. And there's no offense to any of the men that are here. This is my wound. This is my wound. This was the only man I trusted, was Jesus. And I used to ask him, I was afraid, I would ask him to hide me in his wounds, protect me. Please don't let anything bad happen to me anymore. But because I didn't deal with the original trauma, it kept happening over and over and over again. And I went to State for Eyes, and I had terrible PTSD. Everything came flooding back. Like 20 years of abuse came flooding back in a single second. And I missed my appointment. And they said, well, you missed your appointments, now we have to start over again, so we can't see you for 3 months. I said, I'm not okay when you have to put yourself in the hospital. And I went to the hospital, and they said, okay, you have to take off your clothes. And I had just been assaulted. And I said, I'm not taking my clothes off. They said, well, you have to. So they got the orderlies in, and I looked the orderly in the eye, and I said to him, I have a lot of rage. Do you have a family at home? I have a wife. I said, if you want to get home to your wife, you better let me go. And I was suicidal, and they let me go. By the grace of God, they let me go. Because they shouldn't have. That's incredible that they let me go. So I know that God has always been here for me. I was going back and forth in and out of the church because every once in a while I would hear something that was hateful. And I may not have been living an LGBTQ life at all, I may not have even have been in like a relationship. It was more like a best friendship, family relationship. There was no intimacy anymore, but it still stung because I was still identifying in that way. And it was really, really hard to go through all that. So it's like a big story, but this is it. I'm trying to condense it as much as possible to not take up too much time, as I'm sure you have questions, but just compassionate listening. If somebody tells you that they're LGBT, I see there's a thing in the back about, what do they say about, saying pronouns? You don't have to. I mean, let's say, I remember I was identifying as a they, them. I was. Nobody had a reason to ever say those pronouns to me, like ever. Hi, how are you? There's ways around it. But if you're not going to affirm these people, a person like me, they're going to run back into the arms of this world and they're going to get hurt. Because for a person like me that was seeking God, I was looking in some really bad places that would affirm me, and they were horrible places, which could be a story for another day. But please be compassionate, because you can say something to someone, and I'm going to tell you, being LGBT, you're on the edge. All you need is that one little push, and you're done. And I did try to take my life twice. I did, because it was a very painful existence for me. So that's my witness. I think I hit everything, I hope. Thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry if it is warm in here, but I'm sweating because I'm a little nervous because I've actually never told the story like in this kind of setting before. And I have some wonderful priests that I know, and I've been working with them, and I've been telling them. The priest asked me, he said, what was it that I did that finally made you stay? Because that's why I'm taking this step. I said, honestly, you said I was your friend. And you told me that you loved me. That's it. That's it. LGBTQ, we're not special. We suffer just like everyone else, but if you understood what this world does to us, it's horrible what this world does to us. The choices that it makes us, tells us to make. And then the first thing that they want to go after is our families. They say they're not going to accept you. Or they have to accept you to a point that it's like ridiculous. So that's it. That's all I have to say for now. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to sit down. Okay. So if anybody has any questions, and I want you to, one of the things we had in the community was a safe space. And I actually told students in my psychology class, I said to them, I had a thing called Ask a Gay instead of Ask Away. Ask me anything, I will not be offended. It could be anything. As long as it's respectful. So if anybody has any questions at all, please feel free. Thank you.
You mentioned, I don't know if this was the moment, but you mentioned like the moment where your good priest friend like put out his arms and like said he loved you. Were there other like catalyst moments that brought you back into the church?
So I was, after I had my experience when I was assaulted and I left my other relationship, I did fall in love again. And I was very unhappy. I'm like, God, please. Because I was back at the church, and I think that Jesus wanted me to sacrifice this. So the relationship that I was in has really shifted. I had a priest tell me how I felt about her. And I said, I really love her. And he said to me, who said you can't love her? Who said this person can't be your family and your companion for the rest of your life? And I said, I can love her? Yeah. But you have to follow the same rules of chastity as everyone else. And I said, there's chastity rules for straight people? So that kind of did it. So I don't have to stop loving this person. Who knew?
You love your mother.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different types of love. I'm actually reading a book right now called The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm going to be checking that out. Thank you.
It's a great book. It's really good.
Yes.
What would you say to parents if, they have a child struggling? Would you suggest that they look into areas of trauma in the child's life, or?
Absolutely. I went to a lot of groups, so there's a lot of self-help groups, and I can honestly say, and again, this is only my own experience, I did not meet one person that identified as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, ... that was not sexually abused, that was not beaten. There's some real issues here, and in my story, the psychologists were not paying attention. I took the easy way out, and so did they. And that was not, and fast forward, I'm studying psychology right now, and I came out in the 90s, like I got caught up in the whole Ellen thing and stuff, and because that was what normal was. And you have to see all the studies they did on women from the 90s, from that period. So, that's very telling.
What do you mean by the studies? What was that?
They did studies on women who were coming out of the closet in the 1990s, and I went to a place called Identity House because I was confused. And I was told by my therapist to go there, and they said, listen, if you really are gay, they'll be able to help you. This is a little part of the story that I haven't told you yet. And when I went there, it was like maybe about 10 women, it's all women that were there, all women that were, and I was told they were all questioning just like you. These were older women that were out of the closet for at least 10 years.
Oh, wow.
I was the only one there that I was confused. And I was young. And they really, 10 years, if you're 22 years old, 32 and 22 is a very big age difference. So they did a lot of studies based on women who were identifying as lesbians in the late 90s about suicide rates and stuff like that. But they were really pushing it. They were really, really pushing it at that point.
Did that show a lot of abuse in it, or did they
Yeah.
study that?
There was some, young women there that, some younger women that were there telling me, when I was growing up, I was a kid, I wanted to be a nun too. When I was growing up, I wanted a sister too, but we all know what that means. And we all had like a similar experience if they were, and these are medical professionals, they're supposed to not do any harm, and they did. They did a lot of harm. I do know about 3 women that did commit suicide. So the suicide rates are up, and people are more out of the closet now, and they're looking for more affirmation. But the suicide rates are going up. And I think I have a reason for that is because when you feel like he loves us no matter what, even when we turn our backs, he still loves us. But we don't know that. So if you don't have the light of Christ, then you're not going to be happy. People say that they're happy and they insult us by saying gay. They're not happy. How could you be happy without your family? So if somebody is struggling with this, one of the things that I'm hoping to make my work is because courage was good, but it seemed to be more for people that were having difficulties controlling their impulses, almost like sex addiction. I went to courage and I was offended. And I'm like, I don't have this problem. So I said, why are you treating gay and lesbian people like they have a sex addiction? That's not what this is. So I had a hard time with courage. It wasn't for me, but it could be for someone else. Then you have outreach, which is the opposite end of the spectrum, where there was a priest saying, I want to be able to marry 2 women in a church. Okay, so it's like there was nothing in between, and I feel like we need to have a middle way. We have to have a middle way that's compassionate and loving and not affirming at the same time. And you can do that. You can still just see beyond pronouns, see beyond labels, and see the person as a human being and just love them. Because that's what we're told to do. Jesus said that people will know that you're my disciples by how you love each other. And condemning people from the pulpit is not, Jesus didn't do that. There was a woman that was caught in sin of adultery. What did he do? That's the example that we're all supposed to follow, which is compassion, because there's a lot of suffering. So yeah, in my experience, there was not even one person. And people that were transgender in particular, they suffered the most horrible, horrible abuse. When kids go into foster care, they don't have any love, so what they do there is they turn to each other for comfort. And 9 out of 10 times it's going to be sexual comfort. There's nobody watching them. They have no love. And they're with people of the same sex. You turn on the internet, you turn on media, you turn on TV shows, and it's right there, it's in your face. And a lot of kids in foster homes, they don't have fathers. They don't have that male role model, which is so necessary. So there's like a lot of trappings with this. And it is a downward spiral. Spiritually speaking it is, but also mentally and emotionally. It puts the wrong Band-Aid on a really, really deep cut. It doesn't help. It just makes things worse. That's my opinion from what I experienced. Yeah.
What is your advice for evangelizing to this community with love, yet not being affirming, since it is June, and we live in a world of social media? I see a lot of Christians going to pride events and trying to speak to people who identify as LGBTQ, but many of the interactions tend to be very heated and not go well. In my opinion, it might not be a great strategy for evangelizing to them, but in your point of view, what would be the greatest way to evangelize to them?
So I know that they have smaller pride events where they'll have tables and you can set some stuff up. It is tricky. It's very, very tricky because when I tell you that the devil has a hand in it, he does. And, he is not stronger than God, but he's smart. Okay? So one of the things that I would do is I wouldn't go to pride. I think that isn't something I would do, but you have to call people by the name that they're using, at least initially. You have to. Because there's also, they warn young people and they warn everybody at these pride centers. They'll warn them and they'll say, if you see something and it says that they're going to be there for you and they say same-sex attraction, that's a red flag. Don't go near it because they're going to try to convert you. So they know the key words. So yeah, you have to use LGBTQ. You have to. And then you welcome people in, or you don't have to do anything at all. It's tough, especially for the month of June, right? I've actually asked the priest, can we have an LGBTQ youth mass at your church? Why would we do that? I said, because the Pride Center's doing it. And he goes, well, what do you think we should do? And I said, let them in. Let them have some incense burning. Have the candles lit. Take the Eucharist out. And let Jesus do the rest. People that think that they're helping people are not doing it on their own. He's doing it. With the help of the Blessed Mother. It has nothing to do with us. Open the door. When Courage told me that I couldn't use LGBTQ anymore, I said to the priest, I remember this priest, and I said to him, do you have any idea how long it took me to accept that part of myself? How I agonized over it? The reality was I really didn't. But I thought I had at that time. What is the name? The name, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Just open the door. But there are trigger words that are there. Would I go to pride? No. That I wouldn't do. And you also have, I want you to be aware too, for parents of trans kids, why are they doing this to them? Some of the parents are sick. That they didn't want little Johnny, they wanted little Jane. And that's a fact, that does happen. But the doctors are telling them, if you don't give your child gender-affirming care, they're going to die. Okay, do you hear it, right? It's very complicated. That's what I hate about this box, because it's not that simple. None of it is that simple, but you do have to use language that people are a little comfortable with, at least initially.
Okay, so
Yeah.
because I'm new to the Catholic Church, and I have seen LGBTQ groups in certain parishes or Catholic schools. So now I'm wondering, wondering if that is their strategy of trying to welcome them into the church, or if they're actually affirming their beliefs. How do you know whether they are trying to draw them closer to Jesus, or they're affirming their identity and telling them they can also serve Jesus?
Right. So what's happening is that there's a church, St. Francis Xavier, and they have lesbian Catholics. They are not Catholic at all. They're not. Okay? What I say to do is you can say we're having a special holy hour and mass for LGBTQ youth, and then you know what you mentioned about LGBTQ after that? Nothing. Just get them in the door. That's it. That's what I mean about these pride masses. They go too far. I think I've actually never gone to a pride mass. I wanted to. I'm like, cool, they're having a pride mass. And I'm like, something was stopping me because I was like, but that's not right. There's something not right with that, you know? So, but that's what I mean. So, you know, even I was forming an LGBTQ rosary where LGBTQ, 5 letters, will pray for the lesbian community and the bi community, like that's what I was doing. And then like all of these other devotions and stuff, and I said, wait a second, let's just pray the rosary. That's it. Don't change a thing. Because for me, I remember feeling like I was given a watered down version of the faith. And I don't want that. You know, I wanted to be able to access my faith where Mother Mary was there. I needed her. You know, and it was like more like Protestant. When they start to do that, it's really not Catholic anymore. It's not. And your soul knows it. Your soul, your heart. You know the truth. So, yeah, that's, you know, again, just, you can call it whatever you want.
With that statistic that now I've recently heard on the Ruth Institute that there's more ex-gays in the world than gays, like by a whole lot, like the numbers are huge of ex-gays.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's important to, as you grow in your faith, to not identify as LGBTQ?
Yeah. This was the biggest step that I've ever made. Taking that step allowed me to be here right now. I could not, something that a priest told me 5 years ago, he planted that seed. That's all they can do is plant a seed, and you have to let God cultivate the rest. But no, I mean, why are people not identifying in this way? I mean, if you take a look at what the media is projecting onto this community that's already suffering, I mean, the things that they have, the things they're doing in the name of this community are really horrible. You know, drag story hour, you have the Jesus Hot Bod competition on Easter Sunday. I mean, this like that thing with the Olympics.
Yeah, that was terrible.
It was horrible. You know, and I remember when this was happening, what they were doing actually helped shock me away from it. And I'm like, I'm not, this is not my community. Even though I never felt like it was in the first place, but then what they were doing, like, it was just absolutely terrible. So I think that has a lot to do with it. So if you take a look at of what the media is projecting, and you see people say, nope, I'm out, I'm done. And that's a good thing.
Why would some LGBTQ individuals feel like they're not welcome into the Catholic Church?
Because there's not, sometimes you will find a priest or a nun or a parishioner and they're not kind. They're not kind. I mean, I remember going to Mass and I would go back to my seat and someone sat in my seat. I was going to Mass every day because I wanted to have a relationship with Jesus, and I went to confession. I was trying to change my life, and they kept sitting in my seat. When I would come in, I would get stared at. And then my favorite story was this one priest, and he was giving, did a Bible, you know, the gospel reading of the day was God is love, and it was also like love is patient and kind, and it was in the month of June where everybody's back is up, you know. And he started to say, yeah, love. And he started to yell, I'm not talking about homosexual love. And his face got all red. And I was sitting there like, and I wasn't in a relationship, but because I was identifying with that community, it still hurt me. It still hurt. You know? And that's why I thank God for Pope Francis, because I know a lot of people didn't like him, but if it had not been for him, he didn't change the teachings of the church. This is what people don't understand. Like, you still can't get married. The kind of blessing that you're going to get is a blessing like anybody else would get. The media does it again. And had it not been for the kindness of Pope Francis, I would not have felt empowered. If a priest was being mean, I would say to the priest, is your boss okay with this? Meaning the Pope. Okay, so that's, but you have to realize too that priests are human beings, and they're going to have biases, possibly experiences of their own. Same thing with nuns, you could be a priest and still not be a nice person, because they're people. So, but when you're really sensitive to it and you're encountering that, it's like what starts to happen is that priest is actually, forgive me, God, if I'm not saying this the right way, but that priest is actually doing the work of the devil, because that priest is chasing you away from the faith. And that's the opposite of what should be, because I'm telling you, all you need is the sacraments of confession and communion and hearing the word of God. There's really nothing else that has to be said. What could a human being, I don't care who they are, what could they possibly say that could be better than anything of the love that we're going to read about in the Gospels? Okay, what's better than that? It's healing. The word is very healing. And I felt very connected to Jesus because I felt like I was on the margins. And I remember thinking in my head saying, I know that Jesus would be here for me, and I know that he would put his arm around me, and I know that he would still love me and heal me, which would straighten me right out. Yes?
In hindsight, how did your relationship with your family evolve during your kind of like leaving and coming back, and what could they have done better? Like now you have the time to reflect.
Well, I lost my parents. I actually lost my mom almost 2 years now. And my mother showed me her love, because it went from her accusing me of being a pedophile to her loving me, telling me that she loved me. And it's kind of like one of those things where if you're going out with a girl and your family really doesn't like her, you can't see her anymore. What are you going to do? My mother prayed for me a lot. And I think that that's one of the things that we have that we overlook. We have to pray. We have to pray for everybody that's suffering. My relationship with my family did evolve because I never stopped loving them and they never stopped loving me. But to affirm me, they didn't. They didn't. And I remember being hurt about it, and now looking back in retrospect, I'm happy that they didn't affirm me. I have to tell you that my parents, they were Catholic. They never normalized. But they did tell me that they loved me. And that was enough. And I was actually proud of my parents, because it was really, really bad at first. It was bad. I mean, there's a lot of kids that end up on the streets because their parents throw them out when they realize that they're gay, and then they get picked up by a pimp. And then, what do they do to these kids? They break them in. They break them. How do they break them? They drug them. And then they have people rape them. And the ones that don't get past that, they kill. But here we are, judging prostitutes. Compassionate listening. If something doesn't seem right, something else is going on. But we have to really look at the cause and not the symptoms. But I'm completely against when parents throw their kids out. That's still your child. How do you do that? Thank you. I hope this has been helpful. It's been helpful to me. This is a step that I had to make on this first Friday in the month of June to atone for my sins. Because I love him. I am absolutely in love with our Lord. He never left my side, not even for a second. I never felt condemnation from him because my own conscience said enough of that. And I'm going to tell you the truth, honestly, people know how they're supposed to live their life. Because without that divine spark in our heart and in our soul, we wouldn't be breathing. We know how we're supposed to live our life. People in that community, they have been hurt. They have been. I have some people that I know that they make fun of them. Oh, they have mental illness. Okay, and you're making fun of them. The only thing we have to do as Catholics is we have to do what Jesus told us to do. We have to follow his way and be loving, compassionate, and non-judgmental, because I'm going to tell you something, I probably would not have been in that life for 30 years. Or trying to be in that life, torturing myself for 30 years, if I was just, from the beginning, from the very, very beginning, just loved and felt not judged. So if anybody's interested in doing something with me, because I don't see this middle way anywhere, but I really feel like, why did God let me go through this? Call it the Society of St. Joan of Arc. The woman who got burnt at the stake because she would not stop wearing men's clothing. It does not make her trans. She was on a mission from God. And fast forward the clock, here we are today. That was a prophetic saint for our time. The Society of St. Joan of Arc.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to call it pride. You don't have to call it LGBTQ. Right? If anybody wants to do this with me, I need your help. I really do. Thank you so much.